Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast featuring real conversations with conscious objectors to the status quo. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, artist and activist Trifecta joins us for a conversation all about their journey through spiritual abuse to embracing their blackness and asexual identity. Together, we talk about why love is missing from Christianity, healing from unhealthy relationships, and fetishizing certain sins. Y'all, if you have gone through your own form of spiritual abuse, this is definitely an activation warning. There's a lot of talk about that here. And if you have, I am sure that you are going to resonate with so much of Trifecta's experience. And even if you haven't gone through that same journey of spiritual abuse and out of that community, wow, this story here is very relatable, right? This person who is telling you that what you know, what your intuition is saying is wrong, and there's something wrong with you because you don't see the world that I see. Wow, the amount of times that we have people that come in and try to tell us that our gut sense, our knowledge is wrong, okay? That is a common narrative that many people have experienced, and I really appreciate that Trifecta came onto this space and was so vulnerable about the pain of navigating those relationships. So thank you, Trifecta. I really, really appreciate you. And you did so wonderfully in this podcast. I know you had some worry about how you were speaking about these things, but I just can't even see it. You were so eloquent, so clear, and spoke from the heart that, I mean, man, anyone who listens to this podcast is gonna be moved by your story, the truth, and the love that you are sharing with the world. So thank you. I hope all of y'all listeners come away with something novel to chew on, some sort of change or expansion, whatever that might be for you today. Everyone, tune in.
My name is Trifecta. I'm an artist. I'm also an activist, specifically for the asexual community.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of me in a nutshell. I just do art
Sure.
with a purpose.
Mm.
And that's been my lane for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And what kind of art do you do?
Both traditional and digital as well. I also make music. That's
Cool.
a part of what I do. So
Cool.
those are the three lanes that I like to stay in.
Mm-hmm. And then you said that you're also an activist.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. For
Yes,
the ace. Yeah.
Yeah, for the asexual community. I recently, in the past few years, had come into a fresh reality of who I was with more definition
Yeah.
when it came to me being asexual. And from there, I really wanted to do something about it. I realized that there was not a lot of representation, and I wanted to help move that energy in a positive, brighter sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I've given a lot of my time and my life to at present anyway.
Yeah. There's not enough representation of the asexual community at all.
No, I definitely didn't see it. One of the things that inspired me to do that was that I just didn't have like any concept or vocabulary for it when I was younger.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is I actually have always felt that way. I have always been that way, like since puberty. And if I actually had someone or something to give me some definition as to like what it was that I was feeling, I probably would have been able to grasp it a lot sooner. And it definitely was an issue in my adolescence for sure, because I didn't know how to talk about it or express myself. So that's a big part of why I do what I do, because I want to give people what I did not have when I was younger, or even if you're coming into it later in life, same idea.
Yeah. There just wasn't language to describe the feelings and all of the experiences that you had.
Right.
Could you explain to me now, like what you were feeling at that time? Take us through that journey of those various things that now you have the language for.
Yeah. So, asexuality is not having the desire for sexual attraction, just not having sexual attraction, and sexual attraction specifically wanting to have sex with somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about arousal or
Mm,
even the ability to have sex. None of that really is a part of that equation. But it's purely for myself anyway, how I see it, is little to no desire
mm,
for sexual attraction.
mm-hmm.
And when I was younger, I never really had that thought or feeling like
Mm,
other people did around that time. I definitely
sure.
noticed there was a huge difference in how I was expressing myself versus others. Another weird thing, not weird, but
Mm,
another odd thing about that experience at the time was that a big part of my energy, a lot of people could say, is effeminate.
mm-hmm.
I heard that a lot growing up. I don't like to use that nowadays.
Sure.
I think the concept of feminine and masculine isn't really the same for me like it used to. But that was always a part of my energy and how I carried myself. So often I was teased, or people assumed that I might have been gay for so long. And the interesting thing about that is that I kind of almost was thinking that I was, for reasons that didn't make sense to me, because for years, even in those times like by myself in my room when I had those thoughts, I'm like, okay, everybody seems to think this. I'm being either
Mm,
teased about it or is assumed or whatever just because of the way that I carry myself. But I don't want to have sex with men. So
mm.
how am I
Yeah.
homosexual if I don't want to have sex with any guys, right? So that was
Right.
really confusing. Didn't know how
Mm,
to articulate that. And then at the same time, I didn't want to engage with women that way either. Now, I had plenty of platonic relationships, primarily
sure.
with women, that I definitely appreciated and enjoyed and tried to cultivate. But the sex part was just never
Mm,
on the table, never a discussion. So I say struggled at the time. It wasn't, I don't really like saying struggle now, but I struggled
sure.
with the idea of, okay, I find people beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to have sex with them. What
Mm,
does that make me? I
mm,
don't feel comfortable or right claiming the gay label, because it just wasn't, it just didn't feel right. Even though I had plenty of attributes about myself that you could consider queer, a
mm-hmm.
lot of artistic interests, a lot of characters that I enjoyed. I really actually spent a lot of time, I guess, fantasizing about different characters that had flamboyant energy. I
Yeah.
just loved it. I loved
Mm-hmm.
all of that energy so much. And whether or not they were gay wasn't even a part of my thought process, because they weren't written any kind of way. But I always enjoyed thinking, wow, I love the comfort that that character has.
Mm,
Or even artists like Prince, David Bowie, as are great examples
yeah.
of two men who are definitely icons queer wise.
Mm-hmm.
But we see from their partners, they were primarily with women, right? And so I appreciated that, I guess, example, but I never really knew how to articulate it or be comfortable
Mm.
just being myself.
Oh.
So I went about a lot of my adolescence just so confused, and made a lot of decisions too that were not true expressions of who I was sexually.
Mm.
It was just me trying to grasp at straws, trying to
Yeah.
understand, okay, am I this? Nope, this isn't working. Maybe if I did this, I would feel something. Nope, that wasn't working. Didn't have any desire to have relationships with men. So that was another thing that was like so confusing. But the
Yeah.
world kept telling me that I must be gay, right? Just because of, again, how I carried myself, all this other
Right.
stuff. And that is what really kind of pushed me into certain religious and spiritual spaces,
Okay.
because in those spaces I felt like, I guess, almost protected from that discussion at times, And even though I had to kind of man up how I presented myself from time to time, it was still very nice that I found a space that I could be good at. You know, I actually was raised Christian. My parents definitely made that a consistent thing in my household. The unfortunate thing about that, actually, is that even in that space, as I'm sure you know, there's a lot, people have a lot to say about the whole queer thing. And that made it very difficult because inside, I was always like, I don't entirely agree with anything about what some of these organizations are saying about this expression of life. Yet I'm here and I have to make the best of it. And oftentimes I was taught to just kind of focus on that concept of Jesus, right? The Christ, and everything else would just work its way out.
Like magic.
And that just didn't end up happening. It held for a while, but it didn't really stick after various events later on in life. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't solve all of the questions.
And another interesting thing about my choice to lean into the Christian theology, my asexuality played a very key role in that because sex is often looked at as a negative thing unless it's under the concept of marriage, right?
Right.
And so I found myself as I climbed the ladder in ministry, I ended up becoming a pastor and everything. I led worship and all that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was beautiful for the time. But as I climbed that ladder, I just realized a difference still, even in the church, in how I was expressing myself sexually versus everybody else. I was looking around so confused as to why everybody in the Christian circles was having such a hard time with the sex concept. Yet, this is like the number one thing that not number one, but top thing that a lot of people are trying to uphold, fetishize. You can use a lot of words, and depending on your perspective. And so everyone around me, people that I would pastor, would be struggling, air quotes, struggling with this concept. And I would just sit there like, I don't understand what's so hard. This is so easy for me. I don't get it. And so some of the toxic things that kind of played into that was a lot of leaders and people that I was surrounding myself with started to kind of elevate my position because of my sexuality, even though I didn't have the words for it. So it was like, oh, well, you just have a gift to rise above this sin, right? To rise above the temptation that nobody else has. And so I was almost like trained to believe that there was this hyper spiritual superpower that I had involving sex that many people did not understand or couldn't grasp for themselves. And I was also celibate, you know, wrapping in what I was learning. I did it for God, right?
Of course.
But again, it was easy for me, not everybody else. I noticed most people, not everyone had that, but yeah, it was always just a point of temptation and struggle for so many, and I could never understand why it was so hard until later when I found that vocabulary. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting.
Absolutely. How did you feel about having that superpower?
Great.
Really?
I mean, yeah, because like I said, it was elevating.
Yeah.
You know, I would share this with my mentors and people that I was surrounded with, and they would say, this is something unique. You're just like this person in the Bible. You know, you're just like this person. You don't have that urge that leads you to negative results, right? Whatever the conversation was.
Yeah.
So it felt amazing at the time. And I used it as a point of pride. I was proud of myself because it was wrapped up in my identity.
Yeah.
And it carried me through quite a bit. And then it didn't really help, but I also just didn't have a natural taste for a lot of things, whether it was alcohol, all the other stuff that's demonized in the church. I just didn't care. My testimony, as they say, was very just clean. There wasn't a lot of things I fell victim to or was interested in. So that just kind of continued to push me higher into these spaces on being almost like an example of what to do instead of what not to do.
Sure.
And I never really used it as a point of like judgment. It was more of like an individual pride. Like I was proud of myself for having this gift that this idea of God had given me. And so I'm happy that I didn't use it as a point for judgment, but it was definitely easy to do that, especially with certain people that I would surround myself with. It became very tempting to buy into the idea of this kind of righteousness that set me apart in a way that was in comparison to other people. But I never bought into that because it didn't feel great.
Yeah.
Luckily. So yeah, that was another part of my journey that got very confusing when it came to sexuality and religion and spirituality. Is like I had this nature about myself that just coincidentally fit into the narrative of purity culture. I could confidently say that I was like the poster child for purity for that time. I definitely stood apart from a lot of stuff. And a lot of people latched onto that in a positive way. It wasn't always positive for me that they were latching onto it, but it was still positive for most people. So it continued my ministry journey in a direction that was always doing something good for whomever
of course,
I was surrounded with.
Yeah, the community. You were a role model.
Right.
But it wasn't always good for you.
Didn't end up being good, for sure. And I definitely held on to a lot of good because I was, I guess you can say, blinded with all of the glam of it. But a few years ago, I came to a point where I had to question a lot of what I had given my life to. There was one of the last people that I attempted to do ministry with, an older gentleman, really messed me up towards the end. Yeah, I suffered quite a bit of spiritual abuse under this man's guidance. And I think I spent maybe, I knew him for 4 years, but 2.5 years is when it was like an intimate relationship. Like he was a mentor of mine for the time. And I didn't really have a reason to question who he was or his motives because it just felt right for the time. But things got kind of weird towards the end. Like the details of it is very ministry based. So I won't necessarily get into all of that. But there was this one specific night where we had a disagreement about the things of God, right?
Of course.
And he had a very narrowed perspective of what he believed was right and righteous and pure and good. And unfortunately, that was one of the things that kind of stuck us together because him and I had a lot of qualities that were similar, right? So I honored that about him and vice versa. But we got to a point where we had a disagreement about a certain expression of how to worship God, a very, I think, simple concept. And that just went in a direction that exposed a lot of abuses that I did not fully comprehend until like that moment. And he accused me of quite a bit of things that just didn't fit who I was spiritually. And it came out of the blue, by the way. All he has had some awful stuff. But he just kind of put me in a corner to where I was forced to question pretty much the entirety of my life. Like he was strategically ripping apart different concepts of like hearing from God, the way that I worshiped God, the way that how I just went about ministry. He just spent that entire night destroying it. And it was out of the blue. It was bizarre. I felt a lot of emotion in that moment.
Of
It was so
course.
confusing for that time. And after that night, I was a mess, because here's somebody that I had essentially given a good part of my life to just say
Mhm.
everything that you think you believe is either wrong, or he went as far as calling me demonic. Like, that's how weird it was. Yeah. He even,
What?
it got so gaslighting. He even, at one point, he said, I apologize for allowing you to do this for as long as you did. Weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And talking about worship, talking about the way that I led
Wow.
people like into the presence of the concept of God. He apologized for allowing
Oh.
me to do what I was doing for as long as I did. And I just found that to be so bizarre. He, as I said, talked about the way that I heard, or what I thought I heard from God. He completely
Mm.
questioned that. And another dangerous thing that a lot of people do that he did, he used scripture, he used the
Oh.
Bible to justify so much of what he was saying.
Oof.
Now, here's the funny part, though. I've been doing this God thing for a long time. So it's very difficult to
Mhm.
have a battle with me on what scripture says about certain things, because I
Sure.
spent a lot of time. Now he went and he got his doctorate in theology. Like, he was very educated, but still I was pretty fine. So it was interesting because I would actually rebuttal some of the stuff that he was saying, and every time that I would make a point that he had no, I guess, concept of, he would say, oh well, that's not what I know.
Huh.
And so he would deny my experience based off of what he knew, of what he
Yeah.
learned. And if it was something that I challenged, he just would deny it
Wow.
immediately. So anyway, a lot happened from that conversation that really sent me into a spiral, just because of how emotionally and spiritually invested I was. I mean, I was doing full-time ministry. I gave everything
Mm.
to this idea of the church.
Yeah.
And so after that night, I'd say I fell into a pretty bad depression,
Of course.
because I
Right.
had to sit with what this man that I've trusted for so long said
Mm.
about my entire life, and then apply it to my life, consider it, because he was giving me an ultimatum too. He said, you have to be able to be obedient to this concept, or this isn't going to work out.
Mm.
And I'm just like, okay, so he's just going to pull the seniority card in a way that just didn't make sense to me. And the sad part about this season of depression is that it coincidentally happened during the time of George Floyd's murder. So
Mm.
politically, there was a lot of
Oh,
things
yeah.
happening, right? Socially,
Mhm. Yes.
culturally, there was a lot happening where a lot of Christian people's ugliness started to rear its head. A lot of people that I had spent time with, pastored even, vice versa, started to express these things that I didn't feel were right.
Mm.
Things that I really, actually, especially politically, ignored. And I had the benefit of just being silent and protected in that silence, because I didn't express how I felt about certain things. So not a lot of people had a reason to demonize or question where I was. But a lot of that was also part of the conversation with the man that spiritually messed me up.
Mm.
A lot of stuff had come up that I believed in that he didn't. And it just made that whole situation worse. So
Mm.
after getting out of that conversation and considering just leaving the church altogether because of how confused I was, I just started to
Yeah.
see such an ugly facet of Christianity
Oh.
that I hadn't been open to before, because I
Mm.
just assumed that focusing on this idea of Jesus was enough. Because that's what I was taught. That's what I was told. That's what that
Sure.
man told me. He
Yeah.
goes, it doesn't matter, like, that we have a few differences. We just need to focus on Christ and that'll just clear everything up
and
and everything will be fine. But that's not what happened.
No.
And then another weird thing too, when I left that organization that he was pastoring, that we were co-pastoring, by the way. But when I left that group that we were co-pastoring, I kid you not, the next week, his whole dialogue changed. He started talking about former President Trump, adding that into his services. He started talking about like conspiracy theories, just like the narrative got really, really harsh. And that was really revealing because what I realized, I started to kind of reflect on some of the stuff that we were going through.
Yeah.
He was essentially grooming me to be like him.
Oof.
There was this one time when I started becoming vocal about things I didn't like online. He had commented on the post that I made and he said, "Why can't you be more like," and he listed off 5 different people of color that were all under the Republican concept of life.
Wow.
And so I saw that and I looked them all up because I said, why did he pick 5 black men?
Yeah.
I just thought that was odd.
Yeah.
And so I looked them up and I said, oh, okay, they're all Republican. And then one of them I realized wrote a book that he had encouraged me to read with him. And so I started connecting a few dots and I realized, oh my God, no, he was like trying to get me to buy in to these standards that he valued, right? And it just was really toxic, I realized. I didn't think about it at the time.
Wow.
But when someone spends the time to hide certain aspects of who they are, they only allow you to read certain books, sing certain songs, believe certain things without question. And if you do question it, then they play the authority card, right? And so it kind of makes you stuck. I didn't really conceptualize what was going on at the time until it really affected me.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what I really hated about my journey, is that I was one of the people that it had to happen to me in order for change to take place. And that's a big part of why I am so vocal now about spiritual abuse, about sexuality, about queerness, because I don't want people to hurt in the same way that I did. So I left the whole concept of church. I definitely questioned a lot of what I was experiencing, what I had experienced. And even though my spiritual journey now is very personal and it doesn't fit the status quo that it used to, I'm honestly a lot stronger than I was because of how I'm able to now articulate the inconsistencies that I found in the Bible. And the thing that I try to tell people that question like my relationship with Christ and whatnot, I say, well, I'm not questioning God. I'm not questioning them. I did. But at the moment, I'm not questioning them.
Sure.
I'm not questioning the even the alleged authenticity of the Bible. I'm just questioning how you interpret it, right? Because this thing, the Bible, has been used for atrocities in the past. And on top of that, the good portions, or the portions that are somewhat applicable to now, still have a huge cultural difference. There's so much context. And I knew all this before. I just kept wanting to apply the idea of, well, everything will be fine so long as I focus on this one idea. But now I just challenge it entirely.
Yeah.
Because I don't see love in that as much anymore. And it's primarily, again, in the way that people interpret it. You know?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that shifted the most. And then to loop in the whole sexuality thing and how they really play together. When I left the church, I started to open myself up to other communities because I lost mine.
Sure,
I was demonized actually by a lot of people. Like people were reaching out to me wondering if I was okay, if I had like lost my faith, because I was speaking out about like blackness and social injustice. And so it just kind of pissed off a big part of the evangelical folks that I was hanging out with for too long. But anyway, so I started to join these groups because I was just curious about myself. And then I found asexuality. And I knew about asexuality for years. I just didn't have anything to relate to, because one of the first things that I saw was a lot of what asexuality was not. And one of the things that it was not, allegedly, was celibacy. I was celibate.
Yeah.
So I saw that and I said, oh, well, can't be asexual because you can't be celibate, apparently. So I didn't connect it, right? Those dots weren't connected until I started to actually read stories and stuff. And I came out to various people in groups and just got like waves of just love and support from my experience.
Good.
And it was really, really cool. But the thing that was interesting, though, I started to see all these people with this superpower that I thought that I had that were not Christian. All right, there were Buddhists and pagans and Hindu people and just so many different religions and backgrounds that were not lining up with what I had lived. So I thought to myself, okay, how can this be a God gift to me and also someone that worships the earth? Is it? I don't know. Like, I just didn't know. So I started to question the overall idea of what the evangelical church says about queerness and about sexualities outside of heteronormativity. And I just found an inconsistency there, because I'm like, wait a minute. I see myself as queer now. And everybody who is now demonizing me for putting on that label still can't hold a candle to the pure life that I'm still living in their definition. Because I haven't changed. My sexuality hasn't changed. It's always been the same. I still don't have a taste for certain things. So in the concept of like the evangelical way of life, I was still meeting that standard.
Yeah.
And it pissed me off because I continued to see people demonize a lot of queer individuals for things that just were inconsistent to their own life. I mean, people that I have pastored even were having issues with me speaking up for just Pride Month as a basic example.
Wow.
I had somebody that said, oh, well, I don't really support or believe in the way that like a friend of mine is. She said like, oh, a friend of mine is lesbian, but I don't support her lifestyle. All I can do is pray for her. And here I am, having intimately pastored her husband, thinking about the things that I knew about who she was and what she did. And I'm like, what, again, from your definition, what room do you have to judge anything, regardless of whether or not you think it's a sin? Even by your definition, you're not holding up to your own standard. And I saw that. I've always seen that. But it was a lot more revealing now that I was on the other side. And I just wanted to do something about it. So I continued to talk about it. That's why I'm an advocate for asexuality and whatnot, because I'm like, there's a danger here that I don't want other people to experience.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost like they forget Jesus's words, right? It's like, let him who is without sin be the first to cast a stone.
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone says that, but nobody actually believes it. Nobody actually like lives it out. I had someone else that I had come out to, and it was, again, relating it to queerness and whatnot. When I actually announced to the people that I was engaged with that I was ace, it definitely caused quite a bit of concern, naturally.
Wow.
But I had one person even say, oh, well, I don't know if I agree with certain lifestyles that you're okay with, but I still love and support you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what as it pertains to me specifically, what exactly do you not agree with?
Yeah.
I just don't want to have sex with anybody. Because, well, you say that you're a part of the LGBTQZWX7, and I'm like, that's inappropriate, first of all. And second, I said, but again, what exactly do you not agree with? And every time somebody tells me, oh, well, the Bible is clear about blank, I'm like, no, it's not. Because I can challenge most of that. I can.
Yeah.
and a lot of people that I found too, a majority of evangelical types, they don't actually know the context of a lot. They just take what they've learned from another person's perspective and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they claim it as their own, but there's so much inconsistency, not only in the interpretation, but themselves. So the standard is just completely messed up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It sounds like, all of these different relationships have been so incredibly invalidating of your experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, consistently for a good long time. And that even before I announced to people that I was close to that I was identify as queer, I was very vocal about the George Floyd debacle and talked a lot about blackness and a lot about spiritual abuse. And that just pissed a lot of people off. So I lost like dozens of relationships.
Wow.
People that I had like led in worship telling me that I've lost like my faith. I had somebody tell me that I was crazy for speaking about social injustice.
What?
People that I had no issue with, like there was just nothing there. But once I showed them how I felt about what they identify as politically appropriate, that's when darkness really came out. I mean, there was even another gentleman, this was a mistake, but after I'd left the guy that spiritually abused me, there was another old man, old man, who was very nice and who caught me during that time. And him and I spent a year developing a relationship. He wanted to do ministry, and I was like, all right, I'm going to try this one more again. And if it doesn't work out, this is going to say something. And so even that situation got really weird. Because there were people that were following him that were like taking screenshots of things that I was saying online and sending it to him and expressing concern. And so eventually that relationship blew up, and he had texted me like paragraphs of stuff saying, we are not going to have a LGBT XYZ church. This is not what it's about. And you need to be able to obey what I am presenting in order for this to work. It's the whole nasty obedience thing again.
Wow.
And once again, this is a man that I shared a lot with. I knew his crap.
Yeah.
I'm not calling him out in his crap. He shared some awful stuff with me. Awful. I say awful. Human stuff, really.
Sure.
Awful to that context, but human stuff with me. And then I was the bad guy. I was the villain because I was speaking in support of people that I care about.
Yeah.
And I just got tired of it. So after him, I was like, I'm not going to let this one mess me up like the last one did.
No.
I just said, I'm done.
Wow.
And so I threw myself into the next thing that felt like myself, and that was the ACE community. And I talk about spiritual abuse when I'm asked, like now, because it's important. And I think that that's another conversation that people just don't have the vocabulary for.
Yes.
It's happening so much, but nobody really bats an eye to it because they say, well, just find another church, find someone, not everyone's perfect. It's like, I know that, but that's not the point. It's these inconsistencies that are connecting. Someone said, well, why don't you just join a church that's pride friendly? I tried, but even them, it wasn't enough. I'm like, no, you guys still don't have the answers that I want you to have in order for me to give what I've given before. Because it would have been easy for me just to, go somewhere else and just say, oh, that old guy didn't know what he was talking about. Let me just move on.
Sure.
No, it's not enough because people are still like suffering. And the amount of depression that I went through, I can't even imagine what would it be like for somebody who has who's more sensitive to depression. I had a lot of I had a lot of strength during that time, as sad as it was and as lonely as it was. I didn't have anybody to talk to. There were members of my family that just didn't get it. So that kind of made it hard because I couldn't talk to my family about it. I couldn't talk to friends about it. Everybody that I thought was in my corner just left me because I was talking too much about being Black. Oh, why do you have to label yourself as an African American man? Because I am. Why do you have to label yourself as conservative? Why do you have to label yourself as an alumni of your education? Why do you have to label yourself as a Southerner? Why do you have to label yourself as an American? But you're upset that I'm labeling myself as a Black man. I had this one lady tell me, well, I don't see color. I love your complexion. And I'm like, hun, you can't not see color and love my complexion. That doesn't make sense. I'm like, thank you, but no thank you, you know?
Yeah.
But I heard that so much, just people getting so upset at the opposition politically that I was presenting, that they just could not fathom or appreciate any more of who I was anymore. All of that climb that I mentioned earlier was just shot. And even though there were plenty of people, I'm not judging everyone that were like just silent or cool with it, or could probably say now, oh, you should have just reached out to me. We could still be friends. It doesn't matter. That's not what I was given. I was given hell. I was given crap after crap after crap. Bad scenario after bad scenario. People want to question, well, you just got hurt. Just heal from that. Hell yeah, I got hurt. Why would a healthy person want to stay in a healthy relationship?
No.
I mean, the man that messed me up was just the door.
Yeah.
Really big door. But he was just the beginning. I started to see what I didn't like in him in so many other people. It was everywhere. Even in people that were not politically in agreement with him, right? Now, he was one that was he demonized anybody and anything that was not him. But even those who were on the other side of the conversation politically, I still saw inconsistencies. And it's just like, this is not enough. I don't want to continue to be a part of this cycle of abuse.
No.
I just don't. Even like in a proxy situation, I just don't. It would have been easy. I was good at what I did. I was good at the whole manifesting the Holy Spirit. All of that stuff was easy for me. It was like easy. But I was just done with the pain. And I guess I developed a very empath-like gift because I started to feel just the hurt of everybody, especially when I started to reach out to these communities. I was like, oh my God, this is everywhere. So many people are hurting to the point to where they don't want nothing to do with any form of faith. And, that's your choice. No judgment there, 100%. But it's still very sad that people are loving this concept that is supposed to be built on love and that is supposed to be upheld with this passion. And then you have all these people holding on to these cultures and traditions that are just fueled with inconsistency and hate and pain. And then when somebody gets hurt, it's like, oh, well, they just fell away. It's their fault.
Exactly.
They're choosing to do this. People telling me, oh, you're choosing to step away from God. I'm not choosing to step away from God. You pushed me out. And then who are you to really judge what is left I have of whatever God might be for me,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there is no space in that community for queer people or for people of color to be themselves and to be
Very
safe.
little. Yeah, very little. Unless you conform to certain ideologies. Very little. And it's not like that everywhere, because I know people are going to listen to this and be like, not all Christians are bad. Yeah, but a lot of you guys are really silent about a lot of things and allowing this virus to just sit and fester and grow and doing nothing about it, not being open to learn anything more. They'd always talk about, well, God is unchanging. Okay, but we're not. If that is true, what makes you think that your current understanding of this idea is accurate,
Mm.
100% accurate.
Yeah.
No, it's just not.
Yeah. No.
It's just not. So many people are, oh, well, I just can't agree with, because I just learned something else when I was growing up. Okay. So that is already proof of an inconsistency, that you're the one that changes. You know, I mean, even talking about some of the issues with blackness and whatnot.
Yeah.
It was not that long ago, honestly, that people justified segregation and
Yep.
slavery with the Bible.
Yes,
And I've had
100%.
that conversation with people, and they would say, well, you know, if I was at that time, I would have done something. And I'm like, no, no, you wouldn't. Because
Yeah.
if that were true, if that was the heart of the Christian, why did it happen to begin with at that time? It took death and war in order for those things to change. Yet you want to believe in the consistency of the love of God in the lens of man? There's something wrong there.
Yeah.
There's something wrong there.
And if that's true, then why are they still doing it with the queer community?
That as well. Yeah. There's so many people who are like anti-progress. They're like, oh, the progressive nature of life is just too much and whatnot. I'm like, I'm pretty sure, again, not too long ago, it was pretty darn progressive for women to vote. It was pretty darn progressive for Black people to be free, to own land. All of those ideas are progressive. I don't understand this hate fetish that people have with the progressive concept of just existence, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of that might be pointing back to the politics that have become so deeply ingrained within the Christian culture of America.
A lot of that.
Yeah, it's not just about the Bible anymore.
It's not. And all of that goes unquestioned.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not to say that there are some great, good-hearted, beautiful Christians out there. There 100% are. I mean, there are still some beautiful Christian ace people that I've met that I love and appreciate.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be a part of that narrative anymore.
Absolutely. And someone that you trusted, your mentor, right? Used that power to question your identity, question your sense of truth, your connection to God, and he called you demonic.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot for the time.
Someone that you trust.
It was pretty terrible. And I'm, you know, like I said, I'm stronger for it now.
Sure.
But it was hard for the time. And the only thing that I could do, that I do think now, is thinking about all the other people that are going through that similar process, that are going through that similar pain.
Yeah.
And that's what fuels me. You know, speak up and talk about it like I do now.
Absolutely. And I thank you for doing that. I think you also hit on one of the big things that makes this so difficult is that's someone with power that you trust, but it doesn't stop there, right? Then it becomes your whole community. And to step out of that, you lose your community, which we need as humans. So you become so isolated. To even leave that community is so difficult.
It was.
Oh.
And people don't understand that because they just think, oh, it's just a choice. And it's like, man, until it happens to you, you don't get it. And I've got some empathy for that. But give people the space. That's another thing too that I wish a lot of people would do, is give people the space. Give yourself the space to understand what they're going through, you know? And that's just wrapping it back into what I do now with the asexual representation and advocacy. It's like, I just want to give people the space to understand themselves. I didn't have that.
Absolutely.
If I would have known half of what I know now, I would have probably I would have made I wouldn't have made as many mistakes, you know, I wouldn't have made as many mistakes. And that's a big part of why I'm so passionate about all these different things. There was one of the platforms that I started on Instagram for art. We have like different ace artists promote their work and stuff.
Very cool.
And there was a mom of one of the young artists that got really excited about the community that reached out to us, and she just kind of expressed just gratitude for the space that we were giving her daughter to just be herself.
Wow.
And when I read that, it was like, this was like last year, but I said to myself, I can die tomorrow and feel like I've done what I needed to do, because that was enough. That was enough. You know, that not only did the daughter find that space, but her family is also like, this is great. She has that support early on. Yeah. That's what's so beautiful to me.
Wow.
And that's why I'm vocal, and that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm so passionate about bringing asexual representation to the full, to a full light for people and allies like her mom. Because they need that.
Yes.
Because without it, like, who knows? Who knows where I would have been?
Yeah, and I mean,
hard to say.
To some degree, you do know, right? Because I mean, you were on that path for a while without having the language to understand that, right? So I mean,
right.
We hope that by you coming into spaces like this, creating the spaces that you have made, you become, you know, a model, a representation for someone to look up to understand their own lived experience, so that they don't have to go through that same pain, confusion that you had to navigate on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And just gone silent about so much. But that's true. And I do wish that more people who are like not open to being too vocal about certain things would understand that. You know, because when to make it, and I did this on purpose, but to make things, just to push the envelope a bit, when I did announce my sexuality to my circles, I knew what I was jeopardizing. And because I did, I said, I think I'm going to wear some eyeliner for this announcement.
Hell yeah,
So
do
I
it.
just kind of pushed the boundaries of what everybody expected and knew me as, even though I always thought that I would look real cool in certain outfits or with a certain look. But that made it more upsetting for a lot of people. But that's kind of the point, though. It's like, well, still, we have to give people that space. Why not? And in the concept of like, oh, well, it's demonic or not right, or the Bible doesn't say this, that, what have you. Even in that context, okay, just to give them a brief benefit of the doubt, even in that context, what does it matter to you if that group is okay with doing what they did to somebody like me? What's it matter for somebody that doesn't even care about God? It just doesn't.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't understand that.
No, I mean, it's hypocritical, and that's why we can't understand it 100%, because we know that the Bible is very clear that all sin is the same in the eyes of God. There are verses about that, but somehow the Christian community sometimes, and again, right, not all Christians, but a majority of the Christian community picks the issue of homosexuality to be the thing that they can call out. I know you kind of mentioned this before when you were pastoring people and could kind of know the various things, you know, forms of sin that they were struggling with in their life. But we ignore those sins to say, well, this is the sin that I need to call out and say is the worst out of all.
Yeah.
And it's hypocritical to what the Bible teaches.
Yeah. It is, extremely.
That's why it doesn't make any sense.
It never did, and I don't think it ever will.
No.
It never will. And that's the thing that was so weird, even when I had that veil on my eyes.
Yeah.
Even in that moment, I was like so confused by why people were fetishizing certain sins when I'm like aware of so much nuance of the people that I was around. I just didn't understand it. I've seen some stuff, heard some stuff.
Yeah.
And in that context, like in that time, it was weird, but I had to just write it off as, well, they're Christian and they're trying their best and they're pursuing God and they love Jesus, so everything is fine. Okay, I think. Like, at the time, I really didn't know. I really didn't know. I knew what the Bible said about stuff, but didn't agree with some perspectives.
Sure.
But yeah, it's that hypocritical inconsistency that you see everywhere.
Yep. I mean, it's much easier to look at someone else's shit than to look back at my own, right?
Yeah. There's just so much work that I think the evangelical majority at large needs to really open up to before they become their own downfall.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what's happening. I think is that some of the standards that they're trying to present just don't make any sense. And you're pushing people out, but you're also just like demonizing yourself. And it's gross. Yeah. And that's why I didn't want to be a part of it. I'm like, nah, I hang out with a bunch of people that get me.
Absolutely.
You know, I knew they were there because I know I'm not that special, right?
No.
Like, it's like,
well,
I
yes,
can't
but
be,
no.
Yes, but no. Yeah, it's like, I cannot be the only one who feels this way. I thought to myself,
You're
I can't
not.
be.
No.
I can't be. And that's what I discovered.
But like you said earlier, they will tell you that you're the one struggling with this. They will tell you that it's because you're not close enough to God. You need to pray more. You're, you know, there's a veil in front of your eyes that you need to ask him to lift. I mean, it really pushes on the person in that situation that it's their fault, that they're not understanding, that they're not free of this sin. And in that, then you start to feel isolated. You're like, no one else struggles with this. This is just my own problem with God.
And then the vocabulary, even within the people that have a heart to do something, they don't have the words to address these things. So they just see these people hurting and they have to adopt the idea that it is what it is. God will work it out. God will bring them back, whatever it is. It's just like, no, that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah. And
some people do.
Right.
You know, make their way back to the church. And if that's their choice, that's beautiful, fantastic, awesome.
Yeah.
But some people just don't.
Yeah.
And then they become the bad guys. So I'm just like, if I have to be the villain in order to prove a point, in order to love people better, that's fine.
And I don't understand how advocating for Black lives.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole.
Is not Christian.
That was the whole thing.
Like,
it wasn't that it wasn't Christian.
Or yeah,
it was like they were saying, I had some people say that I was just not following the right path, that someone called me crazy, that I was misinterpreting what God is doing politically. So they weren't denying my faith. They were just watering down my strength in it, right? They were discounting what I was about at that time. And I heard that a lot from a lot of people. Because
you were calling out the very real injustice.
Yeah.
And oppression.
Yeah. Or just promoting how Black is beautiful. People had a problem with that too. It was weird. It was weird. Yeah. It was like, people were like, well, you shouldn't label, God sees everybody the same. You shouldn't label yourself as Black. You know, you're part of the problem. I'm like, part of what problem? You know, why are we picking it? Like, that's the whole thing with like labels too. It's like, why do we pick and choose labels? I can't label myself as ace or Black, but again, you can label yourself as Republican.
Right.
Oh, but that's like ordained by God. I'm like, bro, someone said that. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that.
No, not at all. And even if God does see all people the same, sure, take that premise for that, right? That doesn't change the years of systemic oppression that have occurred and continue to affect our society.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you get into the questions of like, you know, you'd ask them sins in the world, right? Oh, that's because, you know, the devil, and so God doesn't control everything. There's sin in the world. There has been injustice that has occurred in this country for years against people of color. So I don't understand, even if you want to say God sees all people the same, sure. You're just going to ignore that whole reality?
Yeah, and a lot of people do. I've tried to have that conversation with some people, and they're just like, well, things are better now. Things are different. Things are changing. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say or trying to promote. But you just want to hold on to these oppressive concepts or not even bother questioning what you know or why you know it when 80% of it is just adopted. It's just, you're just attaching to your family traditions. Like, so little of it is like self-explored. It's just, oh, well, that just makes sense for me at the time, so I'm just gonna adapt to that and roll with it. That's what I did for a long time. I just adapt to it. Oh, I've got a superpower spiritually because I don't want to have sex with anybody. Fine.
Sure.
That sounds cool.
Right.
God loves me a little more, maybe because of it. He gave me something special because of it. Absolutely. So when you hear that same narrative for people who are politically aligned in certain ways, and you hear you're a good and faithful servant for believing this or that or doing this or that, it's difficult to get out of it. You know, I understand. But once it's exposed to you, though, like, come on.
Yeah. And I mean,
do better.
Right. I mean, yes, 100%. And I think your story points to how difficult that can be, thinking about your mentor, right? We talk about cultivating our own understanding of the Bible, your own understanding and interpretation. But then here you are with someone in authority, someone with power telling you that the way you understand the Bible is actually wrong.
Yeah.
And you're going to listen to my interpretation. And then that person is in power, spreads that message to other people.
Yep. And then people latch onto it and just replicate it and don't question it because some certain authorities have a way about them that gives off this idea of righteousness that is hard to clock.
Yeah.
That's what it was for me. People, I had somebody ask me once, do you sin? I was like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, well, you don't act like it. I'm like, okay. Valid, I guess.
Like, sure. Like, what does this mean?
I'm not sure. But yeah, so that's what happens though. Like when you have these put together people that are hard to clock with certain things, they're just complete in areas where it matters, right? The things that people hold sacred are shared. And then you can't break out of that.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would want to say to those people?
Do better.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much conversation that I've already had with certain people.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, some of it's oftentimes a lost cause. A lot of people just kind of write it off as it is what it is, and I'm just going to continue to love people in the best way that I know how and deal with it. And I'm like, that's a nice step. I think there's so much more that one can do.
Absolutely.
I think people need to be more, need to reflect more. It's an inward thing. You know, like I said earlier, it's like until it happens to you, you don't really think about it or care. I don't know how many people that I talk to, even about my sexuality, they're like, well, I still love you for you. It's fine. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not really why I'm sharing it with you, but sure. I'm not questioning that you love me less. Well, you shouldn't. But it's just more so an awareness thing. And again, a vocabulary thing.
Absolutely.
Learn about these things. Understand the nuance of it. That's another thing that people miss so much, is that there's a nuance to these realities that needs to be understood. And on both sides, I see this inconsistency anywhere you believe or, you know, wherever you are on the spectrum of understanding life. There's nuance that needs to be talked about that goes so unchecked. And I know this because I went years not checking it. Years watching people in pain, just thinking, well, I'm just going to keep loving them and hope for the best. That's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough, especially having experienced it. It's not enough. Because if I was any more vulnerable during that time where I had inconsistency with friends, family, my emotions, my spirituality, this God that I thought was so close to me, I didn't speak with him for 3 months. Imagine what that's like for someone that gave their life to that concept for years. I didn't speak with that idea of God for 3 months. I had no reason to live. No reason. And that's because the nuances that I was experiencing was not being presented enough. There was no awareness of it. So nobody wanted to believe it or appreciate it or understand it because there was just no word.
Yeah.
And I don't blame people entirely for that until I present it. Then I'm like, well, now I'm going to hold you to the fire a bit. But so that's what I would say. I would say understand the nuance of people's experience more. And then the other thing is start to have a conversation about your own ideas of life. Ask questions. Why? It's not about denying God. That's not what most people are asking you to do. It's just questioning the interpretation of what we know to be who they are, whatever they are, to whoever they are for.
Yeah.
There's just so many perspectives that are fine for what they are. Demonizing people for having something different is just not consistent with your faith, those who think that, and also just not right. I've met some beautiful people that have a complete opposite concept spiritually that I've had for years. Complete opposite. And they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Loved me so much more than some of the people that just left me out to dry, that pushed me out.
Yeah.
They're just like, man, I worship the devil and I love you. And I'm like, yeah. That checks out. At least for right now, that checks out. And I have nothing to say about what you're doing because you're happy. That's enough.
Yeah.
And that should be enough for me.
Yes, it should.
That's the thing when it comes to ace representation as well. People get so upset as well. Why do we have to talk about it? Why is it important to have a conversation about? Because somebody needs it. Somebody does. If you don't, fine.
Yep.
That's fine. You're not in this conversation.
Yeah, this isn't about you.
No, but somebody else does. So at least have the maturity and the awareness to give somebody else space.
Yes.
Because again, I'm not that special. I'm unique, but I'm not the only one who experienced what I experienced
Not
sexually.
At all.
I'm not.
You're not alone in that.
Thought I was. But that's just not the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing your story so much because it is an active move to do what you're talking about, to be loud, to use your voice for people to hear your experience and resonate and find pieces that they connect with. It's very powerful.
First time I'm sharing this spiritual stuff publicly. I've shared it a lot with on private conversations, but I don't talk about it often. A lot of times because there's a bit of it's not a great label on the concept of certain spiritual choices in queer culture, and rightfully so. Okay, right. I don't blame them. Do not blame me for harm. Yeah, so I don't talk about it a lot, but I do think it's important because a lot of people need to hear something. At least they would have heard it. Right? Yes. At least so you can see the signs at the very least.
Yes, and know that you're not alone in that pain, the confusion of that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to hold a little bit of space too as we come to the end of our time. If there's anything that is lingering for you that maybe we didn't hit on, and it's okay if not, but I just like to hold a little bit of space in case there's anything coming up.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, in the past few years, this spiritual abuse leading into just embracing my blackness, into social injustice, and then asexuality and the art that I do around that. That's really been my life. As of recent. I'm very passionate about it. I want people to have that freedom and to feel a little less alone, and just to educate the nuances of what my lens of life looks like in order for somebody else to engage in a way that's healthy and maybe even life-saving for some people.
Absolutely.
I see that so much. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how many people that were even 2 times my age who were in the groups that I was sharing things with that were like, I'm married with grandkids. I've always felt this way, and this is the first time I'm finding my voice for something like this. And I'm like,
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
wow. Just think of how much more authentic somebody could be if they found themselves earlier on. And that's the beautiful thing I love too, that there is so much awareness, especially with young people,
Yeah.
so that those mistakes are not made, the confusion's not there. Just be yourself and be comfortable knowing that you can look to somebody else that shares that same experience, so that you're not weird, you're not different, and however you choose to express yourself sexually is beautiful. And then, of course, the nuance of just relationships and love, and how sex is not the center of everything, which is something that I thought for a while. That's what kept me from engaging with so many intimate relationships, is because I thought eventually sex is going to have to be a thing. I think. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't know. People tell me, well, when you meet that someone, it'll click. I'm like, oh,
Validating.
that's weird. Yeah, it's because I never met that someone. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that feels like, but you hear that so much, whether you came up in Christian spaces or not. There's that idea that if you wait, you'll meet that someone and it'll click. And then here's the weird part about that concept. No, that's just demisexuality. But nobody knows that. You know, that's what they're explaining.
Yeah.
And the Christian spaces say that a lot. So they're pro demisexuals and they don't even know it.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think I've expressed a lot.
Yes.
And there's a lot more that can be said, but
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate you sharing your powerful story and all the authenticity that now you are embodying in all of your work. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, that's the thing that's most freeing about this, is that I can just exist without hesitation, exist without judgment. I mean, all those years that I thought that I was gay because other people said they thought I was. I'm like, wow, how many other people are getting that narrative? How many other people are doing things that are not who they are based off of what culture is pushing them into?
A lot.
Yeah. And then that's the really freeing thing about the art that I put out and the music that I'm putting out.
Absolutely.
All of that. It's just so free. And that's really what matters at the end of the day. People talk about, well, as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. Okay, if that's true, let's give people the space to find that.
Absolutely.
Let's give enough labels for people to latch onto, enough understanding, enough platforms, so that everybody has the space to choose and be who they need to be in order to be happy. And allow that to just do its own thing. If it changes, great. If it stays the same, great. I'm not changing anytime soon. I've been this way since I can remember. So
absolutely.
Some things change, some things don't.
Yeah.
But it's all about giving people that space.
Absolutely. More space for the diversity of the human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very powerful words. I really can tell that you're speaking from the heart. There is one question I do ask everyone on the podcast that I want to close with. Yeah. And that question is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal? And I know that's like the whole time we've been talking about that, so take your time.
Yeah. More normal. I would say when it comes to asexuality, that it might not be like the majority or common, but it's definitely natural. There's a lot of talk about it being unnatural or brought on by abuse, and even though that happens, right, there is still a nature to this thing that I wish was honored more. And that's another reason why I'm glad that I have the confidence to speak on these things, because I'm an example of, I wasn't abused into asexuality. I'm not, there's nothing specifically attached to the nature of who I am.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I wish more people knew. And it's not about like it being a phase. I hear the whole phase thing too. Or someone told me, isn't everybody a little asexual? And I'm like, maybe, but those who are not know it.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
You just know it. That's the thing with aces. Like, we sit there listening to that and we're like, no, because we know it. Like, you can go a long time without sex and be cool with it. That's not the same thing as having little to no desire for sexual attraction. Huge difference. Yeah, so I think that's what it is. Normal and beautiful.
And natural. I love that you used that word.
Yeah, very, very, very natural.
Yeah. Oh, it was such a pleasure to hear your story. It's very powerful, and I'm so thankful that you are in the space where you're at now, where you have the community and you feel supported and you feel loved.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really lovely. I'm really glad. It's really therapeutic to talk about certain things. So this was really nice.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Is there anywhere you want to plug to for the people that have connected with your message and want to see your work?
Yeah. So at Showtime, spelled SHEAUXTIME, is where you will find most of what I will be doing. I'm told myself that I would become a lot more active this season, because I don't really like showing my face or talking much, because I don't want it to be about me, but I don't know, people like that. So
yeah, we like you. It's great. Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, that's where you can find me. I had that handle for most of my spaces. So
wonderful. Well, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're a part of the Anarchist community, then follow us on Instagram or nominate a guest for the show by sending in a letter to modernanarchypodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.